Good evening, and welcome to the August 8th, 2024 meeting of the Minnetonka Economic Development Advisory Commission. The schedule and tentative agendas can be obtained by calling the Community Development Department or by checking the city website at minnetonkamn.gov. Copies of tonight's agenda and the staff report are on the podium outside these chambers. This meeting is televised and web streamed on the city's website. Listening devices are available upon request. If you wish to use a device, please call city staff located outside the council chambers in the audiovisual control room. From a broad standpoint, the EDAC attempts to find a balance between individual rights and community responsibilities as they make their recommendations. Individual rights are easy to understand. Community responsibilities are more subtle, but the idea is that we, as members of the community, agree to limit our individual rights for the common good of the group. The Community Development Department, the Economic Development Advisory Commission, and the City Council are charged with managing this sometimes difficult balancing act. We ask you keep this in mind. We ask you to keep this broader perspective in mind as we review tonight's subject matter. Before we begin, please make sure your cell phones are turned off. Items on tonight's agenda include the 2025 to 2029 EIP and staff report. If you can take roll.
Thank you, Chair. Connors.
Present.
Duginski-Sabalka is out today. Falk.
Here.
Haig.
Here.
Ramatka.
Here.
Jacobson.
Present.
Johnston.
Here.
And I guess first on our agenda is the approval of the May 9th minutes. Do any council members have any questions or comments on the minutes?
A motion that we approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Great. And then next up on the agenda is the 2025 to 2029 Economic Improvement Program. And just a couple of comments before staff takes this. Just for us as a council, this is a 5-year look forward, and it's basically a rolling 5-year look forward and of what's really on the agenda and for us to make recommendations. So with that, I hand it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Commissioners. As Chair Jacobson had previewed, this is a program that looks at not only a 5-year kind of short-term view of the city's economic development programs, but also a longer 10-year. If you look at the back of the document, it's trying to project out even further, which sometimes can be difficult because we don't know if there's a pandemic or whatever that's going to happen. So there is a little bit longer range planning in the back of the document. The document is really meant to show, but for the city's funding, that there would be no program and that all of the programs align with the other city goals. So the comprehensive plan, housing plan, and even the CIP and some of the other city documents that outline our priorities. And then the document covers areas of economic development that include transportation, housing, business, or redevelopment, and sometimes other things such as studies or special initiatives that the department has taken on to serve a specific need. There's many reference tools within the document, so as you are learning about economic development, you can find what different acronyms mean, the area median income for the year, which changes every year and can sometimes be really confusing, median home prices, and things like that. So where we're at in the schedule, we reviewed with the EDAC back in May, you may recall, the first kind of discussion about what to include within the EIP. Then it rolled into the June 10th study session, and those the feedback from the study session was included in the staff report. And then into tonight, which is August 8th, we will look at the full EIP document, and then you'll make a recommendation to the City Council on the document. And that will go back to then the City Council on September 9th with the CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Plan. So where we've left off, this hasn't changed much since May when we reviewed it last. We have a fund balance within the HRA levy. It's about 1.4 million, and that is really committed to housing loans, so the Welcome to Minnetonka and home enhancement. That fund balance there, it's a little deceptive because, well, not deceptive, but it's a committed funding from the previous 10, 15 years. I will go into it a little bit more later, but we've utilized all of the funding that was committed for this year, so we will be asking to access some of this funding with our partner CEE later this year. There's money committed to business marketing, emergency business assistance, and then there was a commitment to light rail for 10 years. So that is still being paid through next year, and then that commitment is satisfied. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a newer fund that is partially funded through a TIF district that had some pooled increment and then was transferred into this fund for housing uses. It's been a great tool. There's been a lot of different things funded out of this since it was started during the pandemic, actually. And more recently, the Mills Twin Homes project, and then Amani, which is the townhouse. I have to twin home. Yeah. I'm so used to saying townhome. Twin home at 5432 Roland that will be coming forward in the next month or two to council. So there's those two commitments there. It also funded things like rental assistance during the pandemic and some other housing initiatives as well. The American Rescue Plan Act, so this indirect ARPA funding, funded a new down payment assistance program. That money has been fully expended, which is great. It means there's high utilization of the program, and staff will be requesting some additional assistance here in 2024 so that we continue that program, and then the EIP contemplates another $300,000 for next year. There's also some rent assistance that we have available through that initial funding. There's a code compliance program that was created, and then His House Foundation is a homelessness initiative that was started about 2 years ago, and we can go into that a little bit more later. The development fund is kind of our catch-all for all of the other studies and various things for development. It's also a fund that we use to purchase properties and things of that nature for affordable housing use. Livable Communities was the fund that has been funding homes within reach over the years so that they can purchase and rehab their properties and sell them for home ownership. And then the Community Development Block Grant is a federal program where we have some existing fund balance there.
Can we just take 1 second if there are any questions from the group on these different funds? And I wanted to make sure that I was in line on this. The HRA levy we talk about often because that shows up in the property taxes. Is that correct? And the Affordable Housing Trust, that is a fund where if those funds are not used for future housing things, they just basically are lost. Is that correct? Or they roll over, but ultimately they would have to be used for that.
Correct. The trust fund is a housing fund that has a very specific defined use. There was excess TIF pooling that was rolled into that account for various purposes, but it will continue to be in there until the fund is expended, and then we'll look for future ways potentially to fund this. Where there's there's rules around the new LAHA, local area sales tax, that we're receiving. We just got our first payment a couple weeks ago. But that's more if you don't spend the LAHA funds by a certain amount of time, then you can transfer them into the trust fund.
Okay.
So we're just learning kind of some of the technicalities that go along with that funding. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah. And then American Rescue Plan, that funding won't continue
Correct.
to be added.
That was the American Rescue Plan Act funding that was a one-time contribution. All of that money was committed to various uses.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions or on that? Okay.
Okay, this chart was in your packet. It just illustrates the various uses within the EIP. So as you can see, housing is a big thing of what or a big part of what we do. So it's 71%, followed by business, redevelopment, transit, and then the TIF districts. And I will say most of the business programming is passed through with the caveat of the two new programs that were recently created, which were the code compliance and then the emergency business assistance, but mostly it's pass-through grant funding. And then again, this
Chair?
there's-
Can you just explain that pass-through from the standpoint of where does the money originate from that we then pass through?
Sure. Chair, Commissioners, there's a number of grants through the Hennepin County, the state, Department of Employment and Economic Development, and yeah, the county, the state, and any other federal funding that could potentially go towards very specific job creation or redevelopment needs. So that funding would come in through the city. We would ensure that we're meeting all the goals that the program was created to accomplish, and then the money goes back out again. So it comes in and then it goes back out. And it's just a way that these programs are passed down through the state or whichever agency is administering them. Any other questions on that one?
Actually, just more broadly, is that ratio been consistent over time, or has it been mostly housing for a while?
It's been housing at the top as long as I can remember. Do you ever remember a year that it wasn't housing, Julie?
No, I think it's always been the majority. I don't think it was to this percentage, though. I think that percentage really moved when we set up the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That became a bigger chunk. When we got that special legislation to put that money aside from other TIF districts, that's when that, I would say it went, I'm remembering half or something like that, when in years that we didn't have that money in the trust fund, so.
So it sounds like it's being driven more by resources than needs. Not to say one's more important than the other, because the resources are there to meet needs in the community, but
Correct.
the ratio is kind of driven by that.
There's
Yeah,
one
and
other program, the housing improvement areas, that's more of a pass-through for housing rehab for common interest communities, and those can be as high as $10 million. So you have $10 million, you're collecting it back over time with interest to pay for housing improvements. So those can really offset $10 million at a time, the budget.
Thank you.
And it's not so much that the amount of activity on business has decreased, it's that the housing has gone up.
Mm-hmm. This is the other side that complements the previous slide, just showing the various sources of funding. The other, again, is like pass-through. There's a teeny bit of just accounts across the city that fund various things, special assessment funds and things like that. But that's typically something where it's a loan and then it's paid back over time. The development fund, a HRA levy is a very small portion of that, so that's the tax portion. And then the trust fund has now become a greater portion of that pie. So moving into the housing slides, I have a few here and then I can stop for questions. But this, as you can see there, the homes within reach is pretty stable over time. That was a recommendation out of the EDAC a while back, so we continue to keep that amount consistent, because Homes Within Reach also relies on this as a match for the other funds that they seek through other organizations. The housing improvement areas, there's a little bit higher focus on 2025 and 26. There is actually an application in currently for a $10 million HIA, which you'll see hopefully here in September, October, one of those two, just depending on how fast we can get the information to present to you. So that is a rather substantial project. And then I've had a few other inquiries, so I kept that at 10,000 or 10 million for 2026, and then just kind of evened it out, anticipating that there might be more as those communities age. Home enhancement, that is the repair program that's had some interest this year, which is good. The home enhancement and the Welcome to Minnetonka both have utilized all their funding, which hasn't happened in my time here, so for their yearly contributions. So I'll be going back to council this year to try and get a new allocation to those programs. So it's great that we're having continued interest.
How do you attribute the success of that? Is that contractors being aware of it and telling that to their customers, or is it City Minnetonka stuff? Do you have a sense of how that's coming about?
I had just talked to the loan administrator at CEE, and they are attributing it to better rates through our programs than what they're able to get on the open market. And the home equity lines of credit, they're seeing people accessing those at a higher rate, so maybe they don't have as much access to their existing equity to make those improvements. So they're accessing loans to make those improvements to their home.
And I didn't see where, I mean, I think that's on a slide, but for both of those two, how many dwellings were impacted by those dollars? Because those are HRA dollars, those are tax levy dollars, so how many
Yes.
dwellings did we?
I do have a slide, I think it's the next slide, or coming up, that has the information on the utilization. So I'll save that for the next one if that's okay. On the Housing Trust Fund side, we just have a lot of new requests for multifamily affordable housing. So it's, we're trying to work in units where we can and are budgeting for that. That fund also contributes to pathways. So not only is the fund has its own line, because there's some leeway in there on how those funds can be utilized, but also some of the programming out of the trust fund was established as pilot programs, and are until we get them into permanent program status, they'll get their own line item. So that being said, Pathways has been a great success, and I can show you that here on the next slide. So I believe, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just wondering about the decrease that I had seen in one of the categories, but that would be in the Pathways program. Yeah. 2025, it was listed at $300,000, and then it went down to $50,000 for 2026. And so I was wondering about the reduction. And then I also looked at the detailed sheet for Pathways, and the 2025 number didn't seem to match up with the same figure in the detailed description page. So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, and I was just curious that the decrease in the pathway number, that would seem like it would be one or two borrowers in 26, 27, 28, 29. So I was just curious what
Chair
we're
Commissioners, I was thinking that we wouldn't have as much utilization as Pathways as we did. So we're actually fully out of funding now. So there'll be a request. The discrepancy is that there'll be a request for 200 this year to keep it rolling forward. And then next year, we'll ask for a budget adjustment for an additional 300,000. And then that should carry it for a year or two.
Because you'll start having some funds returned.
Correct, or no funds returned because it's a
they sell.
deferred program. So if they sell, we'll get them returned, but there is
Yeah.
that forgiveness component to it as well. The idea is that it still is considered a pilot program.
Oh, okay.
And so we were trying to test to see if there would be utilization of the program. So that could change for when we come back next year and we see that they've spent the full
Yeah.
500,000, if that's what's committed to it at this year, then we would know, we can bump that number up. Just trying to project what we might need for that.
Yeah, so it
Yeah, I think it's kind of a guessing game at this
yeah,
point.
yeah, and I think that's a good point, that 26 through 29 is not something that's set in stone. It's just a look forward to what would this potentially be.
Correct. And the other unknown is that the Minnesota Housing just established a first-generation homebuyer program a month or so ago, and I'm watching that to see how well that's utilized, but their max is of around $30,000 for their program. So I'm not sure if that'll impact.
There might be a state program that
But what's
really fills the
interesting,
gap.
I think we were expecting higher amounts of requests than the average. Was it 40? Do you have it somewhere?
Yes, it's in the packet. Let me just pull it up here. The actual amount, we went up to 75,000 in that program.
But the actual average was much lower than that. And I think that's what we were surprised by. So we were turning out more assistance for more people at a lower rate.
Right,
So,
right.
so I think that was something we weren't really expecting.
And it was a kind of like a 3-level grid or something as to where you fit in.
Yes.
Yes.
So the extra 200,000 that's going to be requested for that, that's the council that's going to do that from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Yes, that would be the request.
Okay, as
And
opposed
then-
to HRA levy.
Well, it can come
go
from
from
a lot of
either.
different places,
Yeah.
but I think Affordable Housing Trust Fund might be the best place to do it. And then
The reason for that is
Yeah.
because the trust fund allows for a higher AMI when it comes to home ownership, and some of our other funds are a lower percentage.
80% or below. Yeah, so you don't want to mingle, like for instance, the sales tax money that we just received is up to 80% AMI. So you don't want to commingle that program with an 80%, because then you won't be able to help as many people. So,
Yeah, and Pathways, so out of that 300,000, they had 9 loans, and I want to say the average was between like 20 and 30 on that.
Very good.
so the state could pick up some more.
Yep. So this chart's new this year. I just thought it would be a good idea to show you between last year and this year what utilization the different programs had when it came to the housing program. So the top is the ownership programs. You can get a sense there. The Pathways really took off. I don't think we've ever had 9 down payment assistance loans. So that's a great number, because that's 9 new households that were able to purchase a home in the community. And then 3 under the original down payment assistance loan program. So that's quite a few. That's our new record.
Yay.
And then pointing out, let's see, the rental programs on the bottom of the page. The rental registration is a new program that was started this year, and to date there's 277 rental units between the multifamily and then the single family that have registered, some townhomes. And then on our homelessness assistance program, 55 individuals in 2023 and 4 this year. And then homelessness response, so that is our internal program of how we intake requests for assistance, 23 individuals and last year, and then 10 this year. And then rental assistance, we're still have a little bit of funding there to assist these households, and some of them we're getting great access to that, but 7 households last year and then 6 households this year.
Mr. Chair.
Quick, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to comment on the launch of the Pathways to Homeownership program, pilot program, and I think it's just fantastic what's happening with that program, and I believe that the loan that's forgiven after 20 years is so appealing, and the terms are really excellent. And I expect that's going to be a very successful program in the future. So I'm hoping, and I'm not sure about this, but I'm hoping it will become a permanent program.
I think that's good information for us for the council, yes. Homes within reach, are we seeing any opportunities to add to those 63 homes? I know it's a difficult program sometimes to find the right opportunity.
Correct. Homes Within Reach is averaging about 1 home a year now, and they used to average 2, just because it's so competitive with those lower priced homes. They're
Okay.
competing against the open market.
Okay, but we have the funds if they find the right property.
Correct.
Correct. And curious on the homelessness programs, it seems like there's less utilization. Is that a sign that things are better in Minnetonka right now than a year ago, or?
No, it could be that our reporting is a little bit
Okay,
behind this
okay,
year.
yeah.
However, there's chronic homelessness, and some of the folks that were in the program may have not been receiving the hands-on approach that we have with trying to house them. And I'm thinking that there's sometimes it's a long road. So
Yeah.
we've served some people that maybe weren't getting the assistance they needed, and now they're in a stable situation.
Yeah,
Yep, that's what we're hoping.
yeah.
We're getting reporting that's pretty consistent. However, are some people accessing these resources that just don't communicate back where they've landed. So then that's
Okay.
really difficult to know if they've established a permanent residence or if they're living with a relative or what it might be.
Okay. Well, I think it's great that we've got those programs. That's fantastic.
So the question I have, Chair and staff, has to do with Homes Within Reach. If we're not utilizing those dollars from the standpoint of it's just not a competitive program based upon what's going on versus open market, is it wise for us to be levying HRA levy for a program that isn't as sufficient, or should we use those resources elsewhere?
Yeah. I think it's important, and the reason for that is you have years where it's difficult to purchase homes, and then you have years where there's more access to those lower priced homes. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, they use our commitment to seek out other funding to fill their pool so that when they do have that opportunity, they can purchase those properties. And it's a smaller contribution on the terms of the programming overall, I think, the 125. So it does make sense, and it's aside from the down payment assistance that we have available, it's one of the only other tools we have for home ownership, for new home ownership opportunities.
I think the only thing I would add, Commissioner Hamaka, is that if we get to a point where we think there's too much on the books for Homes Within Reach, maybe there's just too much money sitting there that they haven't accessed, we'll let you know that. And we'll, I'm losing my voice. We'll let you know if we think it's too much. I think they're about 2 years. Yeah, there's about 2 years of funding. That isn't a lot. That would be 2 houses tomorrow. So it just depends. Now, did I dream this, or did they talk about doing townhome acquisition? At some point, we had talked about lower priced homes in townhomes or some other kind of situation rather than a true single family home. So I don't know how far we're getting with that, but
Does that take a change in the programming in order to do that, from the standpoint of doing some townhomes or multifamily or
Yes, it
higher
does.
density?
But in our situation, I think sometimes, and that's really what the indexing program that we had was channeled at. It was townhomes and condominium maximum sales price resale over years. And I think, how many do we still have in the program?
177?
177 houses.
We'll find it on the dashboard later.
Yeah, the dashboard. We'll go to the dashboard later. 177 homes that are townhomes or condominiums that have a maximum sales price, just like a homes within reach home. So, but 2 years or 2 houses is not a lot of funding sitting there. So I think we're on the edge of that issue, but I don't feel like we're there yet.
I'd like to add one thing also, which is, thinking about how much we spend on new construction affordable like rental housing per unit. The per unit spending per year on a homes within reach home is actually much lower most of the time. So while it benefits fewer people because it's one home at a time, the actual cost per unit per year is below what we're doing for rental housing, and people do get some equity back. They're living in a home, not just an apartment. And so, a lot of what I've been thinking about, and there were some comments about it in the packet, have to do with sort of as we're thinking about this, balancing all, what's our bang for our buck, and, sort of what are our overall goals, because the mayor, for instance, often talks about how, rental housing is palliative and home ownership is curative when we're talking about generational financial security, et cetera. And so, there's some competing factors like home ownership versus rental and just the general kind of dire need for housing. But a lot of what I've been thinking about as a council member is what is the bang for our buck when we are looking at this and we're preserving affordable housing into the future. There are council members that do have some objections to homes within reach because it limits the equity that you can build because you can only get a percentage. And I've talked to this body before about thinking, what can we do about that? I know the mayor was hoping there was a way to maybe shorten the 99-year lease, and that's a no-go with the financial institutions. And so there are challenges to trying to crack that nut in a problem in a program like this. But those are some of the things that I think about. Is I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Hromatka, about sitting on that money, but it really is per unit per year a lower investment, so we get a lot of bang for our buck on that.
I think one of the things that I think of as a commissioner, and maybe others do or don't, is weighing that versus the Pathways program. That the Pathways program somewhat tries to achieve the same thing, and it does open up more of the opportunity for equity appreciation. So as we look at different programs, at some point in time we may say, well, this one really serves the need better or not, and Pathways seems to be one of those, but they both have different opportunities.
I agree.
Next slide, housing opportunities. Rolled right into that one.
I just answered it.
The HRA levy, as I mentioned before, continuing to fund our down payment and rehab programs is important. There's been high utilization. There's a recommendation also for contribution to homes within reach. In terms of some new initiatives, we're really thinking about our naturally occurring affordable housing and how we preserve that housing. We've had a few opportunities as buildings sell or other rehab and things come up where we can try and preserve units longer with their affordability or create new affordability within buildings that didn't necessarily have contractual affordable housing. So it's all a very reactive kind of opportunity at this time. We've been dabbling a little bit into scattered site acquisition. So the Roland Road house, which has the twin home that'll be built, that was a city-owned property for a long time, but we've acquired a few other properties, Belmont and Welland, and we continue to look for those opportunities as they arise, and we just don't know when they're going to walk in the door. So I'm laughing a little bit because we have a couple inquiries that we're looking into right now. Also, then on the pathways, just trying to keep that program funded as it is a pilot program, but it's been successful, so asking for a contribution for next year. Out of the study session here last month, there's last month study session, the council recommended that we move forward with developing an encampment policy. So our goal is to have a draft of that here yet this year. So we've been working on it and looking at what other cities are doing with encampment policies, and just kind of, there's been a lot in the news lately, I'm sure you've read about, so just trying to see what would be the best recommendation for Minnetonka. On the Zone Co side of it, the council selected to go with the full analysis, so we'll be coming forward with a schedule on that. Which will full rewrite. Is 18 months? Is that what you're? 18-month timeline on that to look at the zoning
that was
code.
the recommendation, but okay.
Oh. Okay, that was the recommendation. That's what I heard.
That's true. That's true. And what Councilmember Calvert is talking about is when they talk about something in a study session, we don't just do it. We have to go back to them, and we have to have a plan of action. Likely, though, we'll be either giving you updates or there's participation in certain meetings for that to happen. So we haven't really designed the process yet. We're working on that, and then we'll go back to the council and ask them for a kind of just a check-in, make sure they're okay with how we're approaching it. But it is a big, long process. So get ready, because you'll be involved.
Thanks for the clarification. I was ready to go. On the rental registry program side, that was also a new program launched this year, so we'll be reporting back out at the end of the year on this one to the city council and see how things are going, if any things needs to be changed, but right now it's going really well, so we'll talk about that later this year. And then the state, Minnesota Housing, is still working on launching the programs out of the omnibus bill, and I mean, it's a big lift. Jennifer Bergman is leading up that charge, and she's got a big task because there's there's a lot of programming coming out of that, so she's getting that going. And that's it for housing. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, and I assume that you're looking for a recommendation from us, so I open it up to questions on housing as well as any recommendations of whether this is what we feel it should be, or adjustments or other comments.
Chair, I have a question about the homelessness response, the encampment policy. Was that initiated or motivated based on what you said, Alicia, like things that we're seeing in media, or is there an actual forecast on potential encampments here in Minnetonka?
Chair Commissioner, that was part of we have an internal homelessness group that we've started here in the last year, and that was one of the topics that's been on our radar for the last 9 months or so. Just what would that look like for Minnetonka? And the reason for that is that we don't want to get in a situation where if we have an encampment, we don't have a plan on how to respond. But there hasn't been any indication that we're headed that way. So that's the idea. We're going to be prepared if it should happen.
Thank you.
For the homeless response program, how much is the contract with His House Foundation?
The original contract was 200,000, and I believe we have 131,000 remaining. So it goes a long ways, as it's providing hotel stays, getting people into more permanent, stable housing situations. So it's more of a hands-on approach and not as programmatic, I guess. I would say.
Right, and then we have to extend their contract because it'll be 2 years that we sign the document. So even though there's money still sitting there, we have to formalize it through the council and extend their contract. But because there's money there,
Yes.
I'm sure it'll continue.
So that will be on the council coming up soon.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that was also started as a pilot program, so we may want to just talk about transitioning that into a more permanent program.
Not every pilot program needs to become a permanent program, though.
Correct.
Good point.
Any other? I'm going to throw this out there as something that I see potentially, and I don't know what, I would propose potentially lowering the number that we do for homes within reach and allocating that to the Pathways program. I don't want to cut out homes within reach, but we have, I think, 300,000 there at the moment. And I could see saying, okay, let's keep adding 50,000 a year instead of 125, and then take that 75,000 and put it towards Pathways. It's not to say that we can't change that direction a year from now, but if we're not seeing the opportunities, I think there's going to be more demand on Pathways, especially with where interest rates are right now.
And Chairperson, I'd support that. I think that just kind of the underlying economics of what they're trying to deal with in the private market versus trying to be competitive and buying those more affordable homes just seems like a limited, I mean, Alicia, would you agree that just the opportunity right now seems to be more in one than the other? Or do you think that's just temporary?
At the moment, this is the highest utilization we've ever had for down payment assistance. Homes within reach, it requires a little more funding up front to get that 99-year commitment. There's pluses and minuses for both, you know. But I will say that with homes within reach, they need like a full 100,000 to get a house done. So, and they have a balance of about 200 right now. We're just, so that would be a home or two. And then 25,000 of it is for ongoing administration each year.
Like if you were to do like a backward-looking count of homes within reach, properties acquired, say 5 years with the city, what would that look like?
Typically 1 to 2 a year, and I'd say 5 years ago it was 2 a year, and in the last year or two it's been 1 year.
This would be the special.
Chair,
Yeah.
I agree with you relative to that homes within reach versus the additional funding for Pathways. And unless you can switch over to multifamily housing, townhomes, whatever, for homes within reach, I don't think it's a feasible program in the city of Minnetonka based upon our housing stock. So from that standpoint, I would say I would rather see the monies be used for pathways that are going to help people get into the existing housing stock, and that's not limited to, I mean, you can use that for a townhome in Beachside, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, I would be all in favor of saying, and that's kind of where I was going before, to limit the HRA levy and the contribution to homes within reach, and rather have the additional funding for pathways to home ownership.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Sure.
You had talked earlier, Alicia, about sort of different kinds of funding have restrictions on how you can use it, and so HRA funding is a particular kind of pot, and we can use it for homes within reach, which is a particular kind of program. Does it translate to pathways?
Chair, Jacobson, Councilmember Calvert, that is a really good question. There are so many caveats between the different funding sources that I'd have to look and make sure that we would be able to move those funds for that purpose. With the HRA levy specifically, you can fund acquisition and rehab, and I'd have to do a little work to see if the other funding, the trust fund, would allow for acquisition and rehab, which is what Homes Within Reach uses the funding for. So there's very caveat in what you can actually spend the funding on with these different loan balances that we have.
Yeah, if I could recap, I think, Chair, what I heard you say is, and you kind of moved into the HRA levy discussion a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
125 reallocate to pathways, 75 more from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to get to the 200 that we were talking about. We were talking, though, about that money for this year, 200,000 for this year in 2024. That's what the council action has to, that's what we're contemplating. So basically, you would say 200 more for pathways next year. That's what your idea is. And I'm just trying to suss that out a little bit.
I was really saying, and I probably don't know the details, but that as a commission, do we want to make a recommendation to focus more on pathways and less on homes within reach, partially because one is serving the need at the moment, and they're both home ownership related, but not to say no, we're stopping this, and to some extent maybe I'm indifferent as to where the money comes from, but to some extent I think we are kind of saying this is a program that's working. This is another one that, as much as it's got all kinds of good pieces to it, it has some limitations. One, the market doesn't work for it at this time. Two, it doesn't help build equity. Now, on the positive side, it goes for 99 years. So I was just really saying this is the direction we're pushing, and that was my reasoning.
Chair, I have a question. Outside of market and the numbers, I'm questioning what families are being served by what programs. So my take on it is Homes Within Reach is serving a different set of families based on whatever credit, finances, income, whatever it may be. So before we make decisions on how we move that financing around, I'd like to make sure that we're not limiting Minnetonka families into being able to live in a home.
Chair, if you want maybe a softer way to do it, maybe this is an idea for you to consider. You could say something like, for next year and for the EIP, maybe you keep future years funding for Homes Within Reach in the document, except for 25, you change, that goes to 0. Wait for them to catch up on some of their funding, and just say if mid-year next year all of a sudden they bought a whole bunch of homes and they're out of funding, you would reconsider utilizing fund balance from a sum fund to assist with future acquisition if Homes Within Reach indeed. Likelihood is pretty small, but
Yeah.
I think that is a little bit softer way to.
I'm not sure if I was going to see if there's anybody who wants to make a motion related to that. I don't know if I could say it quite as eloquently as you just did.
Well, you don't have to make a motion right now because we're not done
Yeah,
with the
okay.
document.
Save that
but
thought.
Save that thought.
And I'll write it
Yeah.
down again so it makes more sense, and then I'll read it back to you.
We'll see if somebody
Okay.
can come up with that.
And maybe one more point of clarification to Commissioner Falk's point is that Homes Within Reach is not only for just the home ownership piece and getting someone into a house. The house is fully rehabbed by the time. And they also have credit counseling and some other opportunities and things that don't go on with just going to a bank and accessing a loan and then getting the supplemental pathways down payment assistance. So I just wanted to point out it is a little bit different in that sense.
And Ms. Gray, I thank you for, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, it was something that went through my mind also, which is that I think the financial education piece of it actually can be very beneficial to some of the families, and it's not something, so there are, there are good things that sort of go underreported also about homes within reach because of those other things. So thank you for mentioning that, because I meant to say it and I didn't.
Just to go one layer deeper on the onion here with pathways, I assume the program, the 75K number, 120 AMI, that was created based on either similar programs or some criteria. Is there any thought to how that could be stretched with the existing dollars to do more, hypothetically, if it was a lower maximum or a different AMI amount? I mean, it seems like programs that are oversubscribed, they may be not too generous, but maybe you could spread it out and affect more families in a more moderate way. I don't know if that's possible or if that's something that's being reevaluated year on year with the council or not.
Yeah, Commissioner Haig, that is a new program, pilot program, and at first we had full intention, or not intention, or we thought that people would access the full $75,000, and that hasn't happened. It's been between 20 and 30. So those dollars really did stretch a long ways to get to 9 loans for that folks.
Do you have on a slide what the utilization was of this pilot program?
Yes, I did include some of the information in the report. The study session report from last month went into a little bit more detail. I can
Just go to the slide.
I think that you had a slide that you already showed us that was,
this
here we
one
go.
here. Yep. I have some demographics on this too. It's just not included on this slide. But there were 9 through July we were out of funding. So that is why we were going to go back to council this month. It is August now.
So 9 loans on average would be basically $32,000 a loan.
Correct. Some were lower, some were a little bit higher, but nobody got to the 50,000 mark, or not to 75. So there's a possibility that we're headed that way with housing prices continuing to rise, and then it's decided on a sliding scale based on your income. But the likelihood that a lender is going to lend to someone at a $500,000 home on a 50% AMI income isn't very likely. So that likelihood of them utilizing that whole fund or the whole loan amount isn't. But there is opportunity there if someone actually would meet that criteria, that they could get to the full amount. A lot of it depends on what banks are willing to take on in terms of risk, and if they're able. I've heard more recently that some of the program recipients are utilizing multiple sources depending on the criteria. So they may be accessing city funds for a smaller portion and then using a different program for a larger portion. There's a couple of different ways that they're doing that.
But we're seeing all of the states with their housing programs and their first-time home buyers, those are just blossomed. There's every state's issuing bonds. Minnesota just issued a really large bond issue for first-time home buyers. My wife is in the mortgage industry, and that's one of the primary things that they are seeing as far as activity in the mortgage industry is first-time home buyers. So I think that as we look at how we can effectively use our dollars, approach them as our dollars, to help more people with that pathway to home ownership, I'm all for that. And quite honestly, Council Deb, we talked about the impact of the but-for dollars, and those but-for dollars that come in more to individuals and less to developers that own programs and rentals, to me, makes a lot more sense. Let's, if we're going to create institutional wealth, let's do it on a local level versus a developer of a multifamily housing unit.
Well said.
Any other thoughts on this?
Still have 3 sections to go.
We have some
Yeah.
more to get through tonight.
I think that's good.
The other chapters, there aren't as many changes only because the business programming, like I mentioned before, is coming through a lot of other agencies. So a lot of times on the business chapter, I'm just trying to project if we'll have any utilization of some of the programs, and it's really difficult to project because we just don't know. So in terms of programming, the fire sprinkler, the housing and redevelopment grants and business grants are all pass-throughs, and some years we have high utilizations and other years we do not. So just trying to anticipate what's coming in the door. Last year we had a business that was doing an expansion and adding jobs, and they've had a change of plan, so I was anticipating a little bit more on the business activity just for that one project, and I'm not sure if that's going to come through, but in the meantime, a few newer industries have reached out, and those may develop into something new. So it's always just a moving target on whether or not we're going to have those programs utilized. So this programming, as I mentioned, is very reactive to what's happening in the business community. Oops. This is supposed to say business, not housing. Sorry about that. So this is our chart that summarizes how our utilization has gone. As I've mentioned, the commercial code compliance was a new program last year. And we've done 1 loan through that program. And then in terms of, there's an emergency business assistance loan, and that's really meant to kind of be a stopgap measure. It's a $2,500 opportunity. We haven't had any utilization with that, and I think that is partly due to the fact that our economic development position was vacant for most of the year until Kirsten joined us just recently. Additionally, there was some turnover at MCCD that helps us with our entrepreneurs and our small businesses, and we're just getting now back started again with the two new employees, getting that information out to the business community. So there's just a little bit of a slowdown on that, but hopefully there'll be some businesses that are able to access that grant. In terms of business outreach, we continue to aim for our 3 newsletters a year. With our 1,900 contacts of last year, we did get to the 3 newsletters. This year, we were able to get out the first one of the year. We skipped the summer edition, and then we'll do a fall edition here coming up. And we've increased the online contacts to 1,933. And then with our business advisory services, they continue to provide assistance to businesses with whatever need they may have through Elevate Hennepin and then Open to Business. So looking ahead into 2025, Kirsten is in the process of meeting with a couple of consultants to conduct a business survey. As you recall, we did one just out of the pandemic. So we're trying to get a take on what the pulse is now for our business community. And then in return, that'll help us structure our business work plan and what offerings we're lacking, or if we're not focusing on the right areas. So that'll help us work through that process, because it's been a couple of years now since we did that work. We continue to promote cultural business organizations through our city resources, and then through our newsletter and things like that. So we'll do that. And then Kirsten's been attending a lot of workforce meetings and meetings at the chambers and making those connections. So that's been a great thing. And we're now members of YZETA and the Minneapolis Chamber. So that's a newer membership with Wayzata. Also on the business chapters, just making sure we have everything up to date and noting what we're doing there. And I did want to mention, aside from the business survey, we're also updating the visitor data. So we've done visitor data and then a commercial market analysis of, looking at how much vacant office and various space around the community that we have. So we'll get a good measure on that, because it's been a few years since we did the work on the comprehensive plan that we did that study. And that's what I have for business opportunities.
Anybody have any questions or comments? I think it's all great, and it's the fact that there are no questions and comments. I think it's everybody is.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yeah.
About
Go ahead.
the greater MSP. So, how well is greater MSP serving Minnetonka specifically? I know that we're in Wayzata Chamber because once Twin West changed, we were looking for ways to really support our local businesses. So I'm just curious how that's working.
I can try. I'm sure Alicia can chime in if she wants. I just was on a call, actually. I don't know. Were you on the call the other day with Greater MSP? They did a kind of an update for their investors, which we'd be considered an investor in the organization. And I would say a lot of their strategies are global in nature, and we do see the benefits of that regionally. We haven't had any local situations lately. We do get them occasionally. It's just not very often, I guess I would say. I do like to have the information about what they're working on, what's happening, what sectors, what market information is available through them. So that is helpful. And understanding big business especially, and why they make investments or don't make investments in Minnesota, I think is helpful. I do think the organization's changed a little bit since we first joined. I guess I would say that it's just different. But other than that, I don't know, Alicia, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the work that we're doing on the business survey. A lot of that upfront work is our responsibility to get our business list really accurate, and they're one of the sources that I can reach out to. And specific to us wanting to do some focus groups on whatever issues arise that we want to dig into a little bit more, they will have the direct contacts in some of these places or businesses where we just can't find who that person is, or they don't pick up my phone because so they'll have some of the more of those contacts for me to be able to access, and then some additional research and data, as Julie mentioned. So we do lean on them for that support when we need it, and it is valuable.
Great.
With that, I'll move on to transit. This one, Julie participates on our commuter services, so that's our participation in trying to convince people not to drive alone. So they have ride your bike, ride with a friend, take light rail when it opens, all of those things. So that is and this contribution is based on population, correct? So that is our contribution for that, to participate in that organization and take cars off the road to make traffic patterns better. So in 2025, we have a lot going on right currently. Metro Transit is in their process of kind of reworking the network out of COVID. So they have their process going now. And then in addition, we've contracted with Nelson Nygaard to conduct a transit study that's in parallel to what Metro Transit is working on, so that when we get the Metro Transit recommendations, we will have some of our own research and data to determine where we want our service levels to be, and then we can bring more informed information to the EDAC and council. So those two processes are going on at the same time. And then also we continue to look through for trail connection opportunities and just various transit opportunities as things continue to change. So we are pretty deep in the weeds right now on our Nelson Nygaard work, and we should have something later this year to report out to on that. Any questions on the transit stuff? Light rail's plugging along. The systems work's underway, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I have to depart a little early this evening. Thank
Okay.
you all.
Any questions on the transit?
I have one question on the study.
Yeah.
Is the study going to take on internal Minnetonka travel, like traveling from different ends of the city, or is it mostly in and out of the metro?
It is looking at internal systems. It's also looking at alternative systems, so not only bus transit, LRT, microtransit, and those types of things, not only internally but externally. So there is a lot, we have a lot of data on where people are coming from and going to, their trips, concentrations of utilization, it's a really big analysis. So there's a lot of data in there that we're digging into. Okay, I'll move on to development. This area really is our chapter where we focus on various studies that we have underway. So a lot of our kind of daily activities involve paying for studies and different things to help us do our job better and make more informed decisions. So that pre-development funding can pay for consultants, legal, financial consultants, all transit, business survey stuff. So there's a lot that goes into that. So we continue to like to keep that funded because it helps us make better informed decisions or recommend better decisions to be made. And then on our LRT station, that's that final payment for the LRT. The final levy for that is next year. And then the studies, plans, and research, we just keep that in there as well. We have a number of things that we're studying all the time with the comp plan and the zoning study, and just a lot. When we can offset these things with grant opportunities, we do that with things such as the Zone Co. We were able to get a grant to pay for some of that initial work. So that is what that is. And then I think this is our last slide here. This is the one we usually end on. So you can see the levy, the trust fund request, and then the Affordable Housing Trust Fund opportunities. I will note that we just received our sales tax contribution. We had a portion of it, so it was a little under three something. And then I think we get another payment for that in December. And we have 4 years to expend those funds, and it can't be used for existing programs, which is a new kind of twist on the funding. So you couldn't say, I want to use the sales tax money to fund pathways because it's already existing programs. So the idea is that it would be used for new projects when they come in the door. So like a new housing development type of situation. And then if that money is not expended in the 4-year term, then we can ask the state if we can move it into the trust fund, and they have to approve it before that happens. So there's a lot of rules around that funding.
You said 3 something. I'm
300,000.
Okay.
I think
I
our estimate was
wanted to know how many
531.
zeros. Yeah.
Yeah.
532.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give a little context as these new funding sources roll out. We're continually learning, what the intent was in the legislation and how the money can be used, and so we're working through that.
And is that specifically earmarked towards housing?
Yes, affordable housing.
80%, right?
So it's 80% for rental and 115 for homeownership.
115 is a new number.
I know. Yeah, 120, a lot of federal programs go up to 120% AMI, but this one's specifically 115. So it's just another one of those things where if you try and mash up the funding sources, it's really gets really tricky on keeping track of which ones you're using.
And then, Chair, I did give you a slide to look at, maybe, if you can open.
Oh, what am I doing?
I did a new slide for a recommendation to see if they see if they could
Oh, where do,
in the F drive. Yeah, right there at the top one. Perfect.
there we go.
So just to help you along, and you don't have to use this. This is just kind of what I heard you say.
Well, I was going to ask if anybody,
Oh yeah,
Add a
sorry. I
recommendation.
will let you do that first. Sorry.
that's okay.
I'm looking at that and trying to, I'd kind of worded something, and Mr. Chair, if you want
Go ahead.
to temporarily reduce future funding for homes within reach, and if permitted by use requirements, use HRA levy to fund additional pathway to home ownership.
And I think this slide says almost essentially the same. The only thing
Same thing, yeah.
only thing I did parse out a little bit more for you is
It's
there's
the
a difference between the levy itself for 25 and then what the actual EIP document. And you'll see I put 25,000
Okay.
in there. I'm gonna have to switch that. We'll have to do
Do you want to type it in?
pathways
do
for.
we have an annual administration fee
We
to
do.
homes within reach, and is
Yeah.
that
It's the 25,000.
that's 25,000?
So I'd have to move pathways to 100. Sorry, can you escape out and retype that? So I'm going to change pathways to 100 and then put 100 in AHTF, which is the trust fund behind there on the, there you go. So I'm still saying
Yeah.
pay their administration in the levy. Pathways would get 100 from the levy. 100 would still come from the housing trust fund. The EIP document looking forward would say still $125,000 per year, but you'd reconsider that next year depending on
Right.
what was happening. And then the third bullet was you'd consider a request if the funds were exhausted in 25 for some reason. They bought a couple of houses and now they
Right.
don't have
Or
any
if there
money.
was a, or if there was a change in the parameters, and it could be used for additional housing, types of housing stock.
Okay. We can write that.
Okay, so I think we have a motion. Do we have a second? Can we take roll on that?
Okay. Connors,
Yes.
Duginski, Sabolka is excused today. Falk,
No.
Haig,
Yes.
Romatka,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
and Johnston is absent. Okay.
Okay, so recommendation passes, and it's a recommendation to the council to consider.
That was approving everything else in the document too, right? Not just the
Yep.
housing.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just so I understand the logistics of the next step, will it be passed on with the context of Commission Member Falk's comments as well?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll summarize all the comments for the council. Yep. Okay. All right, on to the staff report. Thank you for your feedback. It's very helpful. Okay.
We thank you for an amazing amount of work.
And
Thank you.
this, I printed off because I thought it was so helpful as to see
I
how.
print it off and put it on my desk every day.
I mean, I think that again, I think that you guys are doing a wonderful job of making it easier for us to understand. And I've been on this commission for I don't know how many years, And every time the economic improvement plan comes up, I'm like, oh my God, now I got to remember what this stuff is. So it's most helpful when we see it like this.
Yeah, it's terrific. I printed mine too.
I'm trying to follow the sustainability initiative and not print, but I think it's excellent.
Yeah, but trees are a renewable resource, especially here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. We think
Fireplace fuel too.
fireplace fuel is going to have more carbon impact than putting this.
All right, get on with the staff report.
She's going to take it away.
All right, so speaking of sustainability, Commissioners Chair, thank you for having me this evening. It's great to be here as a new Economic Development Coordinator. I'm very pleased to be talking with you today about the Metro Blue Line extension, or not Blue Line extension, that shows my background. Metro Green Line extension, excuse me, my last position was with Metro Transit working on the Metro Blue Line extension, so I tend to have a few slips. Anyway, but as you can imagine, I'm excited to talk to you today about the Metro Green Line extension, which, as you know, the anticipated opening date is still set for 2027, and when it opens, you would be able to take the route from Eden Prairie to downtown St. Paul without any transfers, or you could stop downtown Minneapolis and transfer to go to the Mall of America or the airport. So as Alicia mentioned, right now the project is primarily working on systems work, so we're not seeing that sort of heavy construction that you are in potentially other areas of the line, as you do here in Minnetonka. There are, however, a few changes to road opening and closing. So Metro Transit informed me that this week there was going to be a lane closure on Yellow Circle Drive. So that was just meant to last for a week, so theoretically that's wrapping up here soon. And that was a lane closure. Meanwhile, the new 17th Avenue South extension, which is connecting Excelsior Drive to the new, or the reconfigured rather, 5th Street South and Catel Drive, is now open. So that's near the Shady Oak Station. There's a rendering there of that, of the station rather. And the Minnesota River Bluffs Trail between Shady Oak Road in Minnetonka and Excelsior Boulevard in Hopkins is also now open. And for those of you who are more visual learners, Metro Transit has also released a few new videos. So there's one online that has an aerial drone footage of the entire Green Line extension route. I recommend playing that at double speed if you prefer to get through that a little more quickly, but it is really helpful to kind of visualize this work from an aerial perspective. And then they have another video giving updates about what's been happening lately at the Shady Oak Station there.
I biked along the Green Line Trail today. It's the smoothest in the world. Between Hopkins Depot and going into Minneapolis.
Oh, so is it open all the way now to where?
I don't know how far it goes. I didn't travel that far.
Yes,
But-
it's very recently opened.
It's very recently opened. A little confusing to get from the depot over there, but it can be done.
Yesterday we were at the station in Opus with all the new employees. We do a new employee tour of town, and that was one of our stops yesterday. And you could see the confusion in people's minds, like, can't you just jump on? Because it looks done. And especially the Opus station does look like you could get on the train tomorrow and it would be ready to go. So kind of educating about all of those systems works that Kirsten was talking about. Anyway, I'll do this slide. Marsh Run 2, if you haven't seen, second level is up out of the ground. Lots of work being done on that building. You can kind of see that if you're in the 394 area of town. City-owned properties, we're working on the contract yet with the developer or the builder of that project, so we'll have that soon. Greco actually is in for building permits. This is the old Hillcrest Nursing Home site, which is on the north side of town, so that will be under construction soon. If you don't remember, it was both senior independent living and assisted living and a little bit of memory care as well.
One thought on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thought, the reason that one didn't come to EDAC is because they weren't asking for any assistance, but they will be providing affordable units without any city assistance. So that's great.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, so when you see these development projects and you're like, did we look at that? it just means they didn't need any financing. So, yes, good point. Greystar,
Any particular reason why they're providing affordable without assistance?
Well, we do have our policy, affordable housing policy, and they agreed to meet that policy with, there's some caveats because there's some memory care in there as well. So there's
elderly waiver
yeah,
program,
the
and
general occupancy 55 and up, and then they have I think that's 122 units, and then the memory care is 40 units, and they've agreed to do an elderly waiver unit, so they will provide one unit. It's essentially an affordable unit where they'll accept the waiver and pay the difference between what the waiver offers and what the actual rent is. So it's kind of like the Section 8 voucher, but an elderly Section 8 voucher.
Who operates that?
there's two different entities involved, and so Greco is the apartment independent side, and River something, I can't remember the rest of the name, sorry, will operate the assisted and memory care. So
Thank you.
Greystar should be under construction yet this fall, and they're in for permitting and site review right now. Marsh Run 3, I know you thought we only had 2, but now we have 3. We had a neighborhood meeting last night with the neighborhood there. This is the kind of last remaining building on the west side of Fairfield. There's a commercial building there. They've been talking about townhome development. That would be just on the east side of the new project that's being built. Amira Villas, that is also a townhome project that is just right by the new project near Carlson Towers, the parking ramp, all of that is under review. Council will see it shortly. And then some other things, some big remodeling projects still going on in some of these larger corporate areas. We have known it as Suez or GE Osmonics for a long time, but they were doing some extensive remodeling on Clearwater Drive. There's some remodeling going on with Zeta Boulevard at 10900. The eye clinic on Whitewater, they're in their third phase. They're almost done with their clinic surgery space. Children's Hospital 2 right on 494 is getting a facelift on their first 3 floors. Mid-Country Bank, those permits are issued. That's right at Wilson and Highway 7. Walzer Kia, we're almost there on a building permit, so we're getting there. And Kowalski's, we're still waiting on the building permit there. That's the area by Sears Auto. That was previously Sears Auto at Ridgedale. So there'll be a store there eventually, but I don't have timing confirmed. I think that's it for development updates. Thank you.
We touched on ZoneCo a little bit. There was a conversation at the study session, and they're going to move forward with a menu of options for the outreach and all that at an upcoming meeting. This is a new housing story map that we had put together for the study session. The idea here is that Julie and I and the rest of the housing team, we reiterate the same information a lot. Every day. And so we wanted some way to share the information that's requested, aside from how many units we're creating and this and that, as a resource for our commissioners and council to have as those questions come up. So this is really meant to be a internal facing storyboard. Do I continue with or without? Without. Okay, there we go.
And then just, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so this is a tool that if you're familiar with geographic information systems, it's how a lot of the mapping is done. They also have tools where you can create more of a story with mapping and other types of tools that are more interactive. So Kendall on our team spent a lot of time developing the dashboard for more frequently asked questions that we get on our housing programs. So as you can see, the landing page here, that's actually a mirror on the backside up by Carlson Towers. And that green grass right there is where the new townhomes would go, that big open field right there. But just to go in, and maybe not too much in depth, but there's a lot of information that is frequently requested in terms of community demographics, our housing policies, various housing statistics. We've dabbled in a little bit of our goals, rental housing, homeownership, senior housing, homelessness, regional engagement. So these are all things that come up quite frequently. So we've put them all in this handy dashboard here
Yeah.
so that it's easily accessible.
And I think the other thing is too is we're able to, you can keep the link handy and we're just going to keep adding stuff.
Yep.
And
And
one of
updating.
our goals is to add some video, some explanation with some of the data that you're looking at so you don't have to interpret on your own. So we'll keep working on perfecting how this looks and how the interactivity works. And once we feel like it's, I love this graphic. This is my favorite graphic. We've been working on this for years,
Yeah.
haven't we, Alicia?
It was just hand drawn by me like
Yeah,
2 years ago.
yeah. And then I tried to put it in PowerPoint, and I'm not very good at it. And then Kendall, of course, perfected it for us. So it really is kind of the all of what's going on with housing. So think about the rental on the yellow side, and the green is the ownership side, and it kind of corresponds to the percentages that you have in each category, and then the programming that you have in each area. And so it's almost like a dump of the EIP, but in a more visually pleasing way. I think that's probably
I
what
love this. This
What
is
was that?
amazing.
we're trying.
Like
we're
full
trying.
stop. This is great.
Thank you.
Just digestibility and the clarity of the communication is marvelous.
Yeah, so I think once we get some video added, I think, because we've got that video up about, which one was that on the,
Oh yeah, under home ownership, there is a video on the
right there?
the Roland demo with Better Futures, so how they deconstructed the property. So as we continue to work on that project, we'll add videos, and then we're working with our communications team to develop more things as well, including there's a new, I forgot to mention this earlier, the
Yeah.
new multifamily newsletter that's going
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
So there is more communication directly with the multifamily groups. And that's all a part of the rental registry program, because now we have emails for all of the buildings. So that's been a great tool and resource. And that was originally the intent, is to have better communication back and forth. So yes.
So we'll
Will
keep
this be
perfecting it.
available just internally, or is it eventually going to be available externally?
If anybody asks for it, it's public data. It's not
Yeah.
that it's not public data. I think what, I was talking to the council about this, I just want to kind of make sure commissioners and council members and whoever needs the data right this second can get at it really easily. It's in a packet, so anybody who
Yeah.
touches the packet can get to it. But the thing is, I don't want to go all public with it on the website until some of these things are kind of perfected. You can also give us feedback if something you don't think is well, I don't know, described, or you're having a hard time as a commissioner understanding what we're trying to show. Just let us know that. We'll try to fix the pages. So this is kind of a work in progress, and we're not offended if you have some critiques of it
Okay.
too. So
And how do we access it?
it was in the packet.
There's a
Oh,
link. You can
link in the packet.
Yeah, the
Okay.
link will always be the same even as we're updating it, but we'll
Okay.
continue to include it in future packets. And yeah, it is a work in progress. There's there's a lot we've already thought, like, oh, we could add this or update various things. So we're working on it.
Right, and I think too that there isn't a lot of, we don't give you a lot of regional data either, and so there's a couple of regional slides that now have been, this one's about engagement, but there's another chart about how we're doing as a region for affordability and that sort of thing. So there's some good data out there that we just need to have right at your fingertips all the time, so.
This is a phenomenal tool. You guys should be really proud of this.
Yeah, and-
We are getting there.
I love this. This
This
is just
this is
recently
fun.
came out.
This is fun. How does development get done? This is but the
Yeah.
Twin Cities Housing Alliance. I actually gave feedback on this. They asked me what I thought. I thought it was city rejection. Yeah.
Yes, so this is supposed to be the roadmap of how development gets done.
Yeah. So it actually is pretty accurate. It is very accurate, and there was some kind of too much inside baseball wording on it when I first saw it, so I did give him some feedback about it, but this is pretty much tells you the story of what a development goes through.
Stop signs.
Just more broadly,
Go back to step one.
just all of this just is a running list of the accomplishments of what we've done in our city for affordability and access and all those things. So I think that's just an important thing for us to be able to put out there eventually when it's ready. And I imagine Sustainability Commission, if they're watching, they could do something similar.
They'll be jealous.
Okay,
yeah.
Julie, you're
Yeah.
going to make your fortune on a board game.
It was my friend, I don't know if you remember Kathy Bennett. Kathy Bennett is the executive director for Twin Cities Housing Alliance. She used to work for Urban Land Institute. It was really her idea. All I did is just give her some feedback about it, but it's quite a rendition of what development looks like.
It took me a while to get through it. I was like, okay, wait, now I have to
for
start
Urban
over.
Land Institute,
Yeah.
doing a board game would just be a great exercise.
Yes.
I love it. Anyway, thanks for the great feedback. And seriously, if there's stuff that you don't understand, we will change it or add to it. If you're reading some articles or you think some data is helpful, we'll add that too. So, thank you.
Great. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Chair, motion to adjourn.
A second?
Second.
Or